One of the questions I have received, I'm not quite sure exactly how I'm supposed to read it, but I'm going to really answer it both ways. Let me read the question to you as I have it. To be honest, I want to reveal something that I am afraid will cause me to lose everyone in my life, my parents, my family members, my friends, and everyone. Please tell me how I can overcome that. The question might also be read this way, that this person is afraid of losing their family. They're afraid not because of something they're going to reveal, but just because of life and death. And they're fearful of losing the people that they love the most. Now, either way that this person is asking this question, I'm going to answer it the same way. You know, when Jesus was resurrected from the dead, he came to his disciples on several occasions, and the first thing he says to them when he appears to them after he was dead was what? 2 words: fear not. Fear not. Now, if anybody had a reason to be afraid, these men had a reason to be afraid. The last 3 days were brutal. Jesus was brutally executed. Everyone feared the cross. They were not gold chains that people hung around their necks. They were a symbol of torture and death and pain and sorrow. The very word cross brought terrible fear into people's minds. And the disciples were the closest people to Jesus who had just been executed. So if anybody had a reason to be afraid, it would have been these men. But each time he appeared to them, passing through walls, appearing when they expected him the least, first thing he tells them is fear not. The most important thing Jesus is concerned about in your life is your relationship to him. The closer you draw to him, the more your fears will disappear. Fear is the opposite of faith. God wants us, he says, whatever is not of faith is sin. So when we allow fear to control us, when we allow dishonesty or some marked sin in our lives to control us, we will enter into more and more fear. And fear is sinful. Fear can be debilitating. Fear can cause you to lose track of who Jesus is. And these men are our example. So they're sitting around one day and they're not knowing when Jesus is going to show up again because he appeared at the most unlikely times. One of them said, "I'm going fishing." He couldn't stand it anymore. He couldn't just sit there and wait. He said, "I'm going to go back to what I am familiar with, and that is my old life where I was a fisherman." And he goes fishing. And the other disciples who loved Peter and found their strength and comfort in Peter, they said, "We're going with you." That's kind of ironic because as I read the passage, I'm thinking that Peter really wants to be alone. But they say, "We're going with you." So they're all out fishing and they're not catching anything. And Jesus calls from the shore. They couldn't quite make out who it was. And he tells them to cast their net on the other side, which they do. And the great miracle of the collection of many fish was worked right there before their very eyes. And finally someone said, "It's the Lord." What does Peter do? He jumps out of the boat, takes off his clothes, swims to Jesus. Not even patient enough to row the boat in. He gets onto the shore because Peter really didn't want to see Jesus face to face. He was troubled because remember, he's the one who betrayed Jesus 3 times. Jesus had prophesied that that's what would happen. And he did it. He betrayed Jesus 3 times. So to see him face to face was a little more than he could handle. So Jesus brings him up onto the shore. The disciples there, Jesus is cooking breakfast for them of all things, calming their nerves. Peter comes face to face now with the one he betrayed. And what does Jesus say to him? He says, Peter, do you love me? Peter was troubled, admits his love for Christ. Jesus asked him again, do you really love me? Do you really love me, Peter? 3 times he asks Peter, do you love me? The 3rd time, Peter's greatly troubled. He says, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. You see what Jesus is doing here? He is restoring Peter 3 times because Peter betrayed him 3 times. What's most important in Peter's life right then was his relationship to Jesus. And Jesus was going to take steps necessary to restore that relationship completely. That's what will take away your fear. Your relationship to Christ is the antidote for fear. That's faith. No matter what your consequences of your actions would be, to fear is a sin. To care is a virtue. But to be afraid is a sin. There's some fears that are good, but most fears are not. If a fear drives you away from Christ rather than toward him, if your fear is so debilitating that you are driven away from Christ, that's going to have a consequence. So if you fear you're going to lose your family, or if you fear that by revealing to them something about yourself, you're going to lose your family, lean on the bosom of Christ. Find your hope and your security in his relationship to you. You know, Mark Inc. exists for the purpose of offering help and hope to hurting people. And we are totally listener or viewer supported, and we need your help. Visit us at markinc.org if you would like to see these discussions, these studies of the Word continue. markinc.org. I hope this helps you with your fear.
Hi, my name is Melissa Weisenfels, Executive Director here at Mark Inc. Ministries. Thank you so very much for your continued support of this video series. Ask Dr. Betters is not meant to be a substitute for professional counseling, but instead is designed to extract biblical principles around the questions being asked. We encourage you to seek professional counseling if needed.